When you think of Sun Devil football, you think of Sun Devil for life. If we get the Valley all in, the sky is the limit.
I went to Arizona State. I'm a Sun Devil, man.
I'm home.
Hey, Sun Devil fans, Brad Denny with 3TV, CBS 5, and the Speak of the Devils podcast here. And welcome back to another episode of the Speak of the Devils Sitdown series, where I bring you in-depth, one-on-one conversations with key players, coaches, and other figures within Sun Devil athletics. College sports is filled with wonderful stories. It's also filled with constant change, personnel turnover, and the occasional controversy. Navigating those waters can be difficult, but thankfully for Arizona State, the Devils have had a steady hand on the helm for decades. Doug Tammaro heads up ASU's Media Relations Department. It's an often thankless job, but the impact he has made for Sun Devil student-athletes, fans, and media members, both professional and student, has been immense. Now, in addition to having impeccable taste in NFL teams, Tammaro has brought a positive, gratitude-oriented mindset to his work. But just remember to clean up your area in the press box. On this episode, we discuss his early days starring on the basketball courts of Western Pennsylvania, the lessons he's learned throughout his career, his favorite ASU moments, unsung Sun Devils, the origins of the legendary rivalry with Kyle Dodd, the power of a handwritten note, and much more. So let's get to it. Here's my conversation with Doug Tammaro. All right, Doug, so we've got to start off with the question that our listeners have been wanting to know for a long time. How would Elwood City High star Doug Tammaro fit on a Bobby Hurley squad?
Let's see. Let me see who I would be like. Boy, I would be an excellent passer, and I would probably be the guy that Coach Hurley says there's a reason you're open. That's what my high school coach used to say. So it was a big shock to me when Coach Hurley got the job because I was no longer the best 40-some point guard on the team bus. But yeah, I actually was a decent player in high school, so I appreciate a good point guard as much as anybody.
So what's the scouting report?
Make him go left, and then he probably can't get past anybody at that point. Also, couldn't shoot but would make a shot when he needed to, and I loved to make a good pass. It's kind of funny now when I watch a game and a basketball player makes a great pass, I get really, really excited. And sometimes it's the simple pass, but I'm a fan of the pass that leads to the wide open jumper that's right at the person's chest and ready to shoot it.
So, lately for you, it seems like a hectic run for you. The Final Four in town, Pat's run, of course, which we'll kind of dive into a little bit more. But and then, of course, ASU recently just drops finally makes the AD move. What is it like, just kind of the hectic nature of the job, and the fact that there's, quite frankly, no off season for you guys?
So it's been wild. I've had, because I've been had to work directly with, but we have had things here in the past 10 months that you could go decades without having. I've had people reach out to me and say, wow, there's always something. That's been kind of the tag, always something university. To me, I like to say always something up, but it's not necessarily bad. It's always something up. We're hosting the Final Four. We're hosting the Final Four in 26. I do remember meeting in July to go over the stadium renaming, and we started talking about that in May behind closed doors, and thinking that might be stressful or how would people react. So we had like 2 months to try to get ready for it. Working with people at Mountain America and Graham Rossini was really big in that. The irony of now when you look back, and I was thinking, boy, this will be stressful, and we're preparing for it. And on that day, we did the press conference at 9 a.m. and there was a few reasons. We wanted to be news all day. The other reason is I knew that it was tough to keep secrets long, and we just needed to get it going and get it moving. And I remember leaving the office that day, and I was so tired just because there was so much going on. And I went and took a nap, like an old school nap, which I haven't probably done since college. And when I woke up, I got my first text, get ready for the Big 12. And it wasn't from an ASU person. It was from somebody else, somewhere else that knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
Because I'm old and I have a lot of people out there. And I thought to myself, we just had 3 minutes to prepare, or we had 3 months to prepare for Mountain America, and we basically have like 36 hours to prepare for what we thought might happen with the Big 12. And from there, Brad, it's just been one thing. I mean, we did that. We had the bowl ban. We had, of course, Ray stepping down in November. Our football team on the record looks like it was a rough year, but I don't know why. I do know why. It's because of Kenny and his staff and the players, but I actually had a very enjoyable football season dealing with this group.
Yeah.
Bobby's team got off to a tough start, and, the fact of the matter is we had a hell of a year the year before, and so you wanted to kind of bounce back with that. Personally, we had 2 staff members leave in our office, Will Edmonds and Liesl Babica, who both got good positions elsewhere, no bad reasons or anything.
Yeah.
So it just kind of was one thing after another, and then a bunch of other things that happened that probably just be in my book. But it has been a crazy 10 months. I'm really looking for Graham's announcement kind of, to me, was, okay, let's go. Let's move forward. I'm ready for what the future holds.
And obviously, with that hectic 10 months, and as well as the decades prior, the quality of work from yourself in the office has been outstanding. And obviously, receiving the Catholic Quinn Award recently, kind of is a signifier of that. How gratifying is it to know just like that your peers recognize you as one of the elite at doing what you do? Yeah,
that was neat, and I said it quickly in a speech, and it was in a story about me for my hometown paper. Roger Valdesari got that award 30 years ago, and he's a big mentor of mine, and he was a Pittsburgh guy, and we were very close at Notre Dame, and then he moved out here when he retired. So to see my name with Roger, that resonates. That meant something to me. And then the connection with me seeing Jim O'Connell give the award every year and talking about his friend Katha. And the first time I was at the luncheon he gave the award, he was talking about his friend Katha. It was spring of 2005, and it was obviously a year after Pat had passed, and it was heading into the first Pat's run. And I thought to myself, this is how I want to portray my friend. I want the same enthusiasm for my friend as Jim O'Connell has had for his friend. And at the time, I didn't know if anybody would, 20 years from now, how much would people know Pat Tillman? And I kind of took it upon myself to say, okay, I'm going to do my best to make sure people know how special he was. Turns out it probably wasn't as hard as I was making it out to be, because 20 years later, here we are, and everybody knows who Pat Tillman is, and there's this cool statue sitting right outside of us.
So obviously, one of the things that really kind of jumps out to me is that this day and age, everybody talk about the grind, and obviously you just laid out a murderer's row of just things that you and your office have put forth. But one of the things I think is a valuable lesson for anybody in the walks of life, the work-life balance they have. I mean, you're a softball dad. I mean, the videos you're tweeting out, and just being present, being able to do tremendous work in your profession, but also just having that balance. What's been the key there to be able to have that delicate balancing act? I
think one is I've had great bosses. Mark was fantastic as my boss, and now that I report to athletic directors, Ray was really good about, you need to go, not me but anybody, you got to get family time. I love softball. I love club softball. It costs us a lot of money, but I love club softball. And when I'm tweeting about our own student athletes and all that kind of stuff, I don't do Facebook. I'm not a LinkedIn guy, and TikTok, obviously, I don't do. But Twitter, X, whatever we call it now, has kind of been my thing. And that's the way people communicate, and that's the way people, I think, have been able to get to know my kids a little bit and my family. The work balance for me is I do the best I can. My family's very understanding. My wife is a alum who's a season ticket holder. We're season ticket holders. That's the one thing about me that I want people to understand is I'm a season ticket holder. We pay for tickets in football. I have basketball tickets that I'm taxed for. I have softball tickets that I'm taxed for. So sometimes when people say, well, you don't understand. You're not a fan. Well, I am a fan. I invest in this program as well. So the key has been an understanding family and a family that loves athletics. They look at the schedules as fast as we do. My wife, will text me when the quarterback's in the shotgun on the goal line, wants to know why we're doing that. My kids, it was crazy for me because Ariana living in Cleveland the last 3 years and going to college, she would be texting me at 1 a.m. Eastern time trying to stay up to watch the Sun Devil football games. Are we going to win? Should I keep staying up? So it's been a good life balance. They get it. They understand it. Arizona State's been absolutely fantastic to me as a great place to raise a family and to have them enjoy a lot of cool things.
So let's go back in time to the start.
Yeah.
Growing up in Pittsburgh in that era that you did, in the golden era with the Steelers, the Pirates,
yeah.
How formative of an experience was that for you, just to be in a place at that point where it was just, titles, trophies, and true legends? There's
so many things I remember about growing up in the 70s in Pittsburgh. I remember going to Steeler training camp when I was young. I remember having to go to bed while the Steelers were playing the Oilers on Monday Night Football. But yet, actually, I wasn't sleeping because I could hear my dad and his buddies downstairs screaming when something good was happening. It was so fun. I remember where I was when Omar Marino caught the ball in center field to end the '79 World Series. I was in my pajamas, black and gold pajamas in the living room. My dad went to Super Bowl IX, paid. I'll go back into the story. Charter flight, day of the game. Sack lunch on the bus ride to and from the stadium. Super Bowl IX, Tulane Stadium. He paid $100 total. Wow. With game ticket. Wow. I mean, you can't get parking now and they had an extra ticket. And I was only like 6-7 years old, but I can remember the game. And I remember my dad saying he had to go to that one because you never know if they'll ever go again. And he wasn't a fortune teller there. Lynn Swann was my favorite growing up. I loved the Steelers. The Pirates were awesome. I tried to bunt like Tim Foley. I actually went to I remember one Pirate game I went to when I was young, and it was me, my dad, and Tony Court, who's the mayor of our hometown and a good friend of ours, and Sean Miller. And I remember we were at the Pirate game, and Sean got a foul ball, and Tony Court got a foul ball, and I was the only guy in the middle that didn't get a foul ball. So all kinds of great memories about City of Champions, and that's how I'm convinced that's how I learned to read. I read the sports page every day.
Nice.
I read like crazy, and I think that the Steeler Pirate era was so influential to me in my career. And like I said, I hate, it sounds crazy. That's how you learn to read. But I read that sports page, Beaver County Times, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Pittsburgh Press. I was reading those growing up like crazy.
So did you want to be, a Steeler or a Pirate when you grew up? Or how did that shape your goals as a kid?
So Rennie Stennett was my favorite Pirate growing up, second baseman. I wore number 6. So when it became obvious I couldn't be a Major League Baseball player after Little League, Lynn Swann was my favorite Steeler. Growing up, I would think that my dream job would have been the Pirates or the Steelers PR person. And Bert Loughton is from my hometown, and he's the PR person there, and he does a fantastic job. And I wouldn't want his job because I would want to cheer in the press box, right? And it's easier for me to text Brett my thoughts now during games and after games. Not during games, after games. But yeah, back in the day when I started doing this, I thought, well, maybe there's a pathway to this. There's a guy named Rich Herman who was the SID at Clarion University in Pennsylvania, and he's from my hometown, and he's a Hall of Famer. And at that time, you didn't know what we did. You didn't understand our jobs. I got to find out a little bit about what that was. I knew there was like sports PR, and Rich was one of those people that I found out in high school about his career and was just kind of intrigued.
So your playing days weren't over quite yet. I mean, we're moving in that PR role.
Yeah.
I believe you played some D3 ball at Baldwin Wallace?
So I played 6 weeks.
Okay.
So the deal was I got recruited to Division III. Baldwin Wallace is where my uncle lives, and I went there to school. I've been going there for years. It's ironically the training camp at the Cleveland Browns. And I went there to play basketball Division III. After about 6 weeks on there, I realized I just couldn't put the time in to be a good basketball player anymore. I won the mile in fall conditioning.
Okay.
And then I walked into the coach's office and said, "Hey, I'm done." And he's like, "You won the mile, and the team picture is today." And I said, "Well, it's a good time to go out, and I don't want to be in a picture. I'm not going to be on the team." And I just knew my playing days were over.
Yeah.
I wanted to start sports writing. And that's kind of what happened is I walked into the sports information director's office to try to get some information. And Kevin Ruppel was there, and Kevin's been there. He's retired from Baldwin Wallace. He had been there many years, and we have a long list of SIDs because they do great work. And I started working for him. And then I met John Bianco, who's now the senior associate at Texas. And John kind of took me under his wing for a year because he was a senior and I was a freshman. And I learned sports information from those two at the bottom. And I can just say that those two are two of the best in the business because the way they treat people, they're just absolutely phenomenal.
I believe an early stint that you had was at Browns Illustrated.
Yeah,
place. How tough was that to cover the enemy?
It was brutal because I was there when the Browns were kind of giving it to the Steelers. I mean, 51-0, the playoff game. I used to work there, but everybody knew I was a Steeler fan. But there was no social media back then, so it wouldn't have been on my Twitter handle, so I could do it secretly. But Browns Illustrated was awesome because it was a great job while I was working at Baldwin Wallace, and I got to see behind the scenes of putting together a weekly magazine. I remember when the Browns played Monday Night Football, you couldn't do things from home back then, and I remember going into the office at about 3 a.m. to finish the magazine for the next day to try to get it out the next day. So it's just different times.
And then another Ohio kind of enemy territory, working a year interning at the University of Cincinnati.
Got absolutely so lucky. Went to University of Cincinnati. John Bianco was working there. And I go to Cincinnati and have a really good year. My high school coach, Al Campman, who's had a big influence in my life, knows Bob Huggins very well. Bob Huggins had recruited my teammate, Danny Alloy. So I walk in Coach Huggins' office after the first couple days and just introduce myself. And I don't want to say he remembered me because he recruited and saw me play, but he acted like, hey, I remember this guy in high school. He was decent. He went scoreless in the state semifinal game that I still can't get over. But there was a relationship there, and I got to be around this basketball team as the intern. You were around it, which sounded great at the time, but it ended up being one of the greatest experiences of my career. Nick Van Exel, Corey Blunt, Anthony Buford, that team ended up going to the Final Four. And the craziest story for me was we were hosting first and second rounds in Cincinnati. We got sent to Dayton, not the original, not the 64 or not the 68. Dayton and Cincinnati were hosting first and second round sites. They were opposite days. So Tom Hathaway sent me with the team. If it was a flight, he probably would have sent somebody else, but it was a bus ride. So he sent me with the team with Coach Huggins, and I get to go to Dayton as the SID on the off day. And again, there wasn't as much to do with social media and all that kind of stuff. And Nick Van Exel knew me because I'd been around the team, and I actually lived in the athletic dorm. So I was like right across the hall from Nick and Anthony and all those guys, so they would see me every day. And so you just think you're going to go to the tournament, and then we win a couple games, and then the bracket starts falling apart, and all of a sudden we win two, and we go to Kansas City, and we win our first game, and we're playing Memphis in this regional final. We had beaten Memphis 3 times that year. That was Penny Hardaway, and I'm thinking, you can't beat a good team 4 times. There's no way I can go. We're not going to the Final Four. And am I even going to go to the Final Four? Whatever, because we still had baseball and all this stuff. And I forget the score, and I'm probably exaggerating, but I think we were up 25 at the half. I mean, it was like, we're going to the Final Four. And at that point, you still don't know if I'm going, I mean, whatever. And right after the game, Coach Huggins actually told our SID, Doug's going, and, we're not changing a thing. So we go to Minneapolis in 1993, and we're playing the Fab Five. I'm center court, keeping the book. Just like I was, at the beginning of the tournament. And I just remember walking out to Hugs at midcourt during the shoot-around the day before the open practice. And he's like, "Hey, man, this is a hell of an intern for you. What do you need?" And I was out at midcourt, and I said, "Nothing, Coach. I just want to come out here and try to get in an AP laser photo." Remember those? Because, there's Bob Huggins at practice. And, the funny the world is round story there is I watched us lose to the Fab Five, and we stayed. Coach Huggins said, let's stay. You guys stay out of trouble. We're going to stay for the championship game. So I had my pass. So
that's cool.
I end up going to the championship game where I watch Duke beat the Fab Five with some point guard that we all know now.
Small world.
Small world.
And then in the next step of, taking kind of a big step up in terms of, maybe prestige and just the historical nature of you're playing, or you're going to Notre Dame. Jerome Bettis is playing at that point, but obviously just the history there. What was that like? What were the big lessons and things you took away from just being at one of the epicenters of college athletics?
Well, and it was interesting. I applied for the Notre Dame internship the year before, and I didn't get it. So then I ended up at Cincinnati, and then the year was closing down, and I wanted Notre Dame to know that I would go back there as an intern. And I had a chance to stay at Cincinnati full time, but I John Heisler told me, we'll take you. If you want to come, we'll take you this time. And when I got to Notre Dame, it was Roger Valdesari was senior associate AD. John Heisler was the SID, who's a Hall of Famer. Rose Peterzak was Mike Enright. Like, it's an all-star cast there. But I was tasked with both soccers, baseball, and hockey. So you can tell what a different era it is. You can't do all those sports now, but I had all those sports. But my one thing was I was the football TV liaison for interviews at practice. So 2 days a week I was in charge of making sure Rick Meyer and Jerome Bettis and Tom Carter and Irv Smith were getting there. And Lou Holtz was so nice. He was just such a gentleman and so nice to me. And I remember I brought my dad in on a trip, and I took him down, and Coach Holtz was just so wonderful to my mom and dad. And 3 days later, my dad got a keychain from Notre Dame with a typed note from Lou Holtz and his signature saying how wonderful it was to meet you, and we will take care of your son, whatever. He never asked me for my home address. I don't know how he got it.
Wow.
And my dad still has that letter on his wall.
Nice.
It's pretty cool. That year was phenomenal. We tied Michigan that year. I didn't travel with football, but I was very involved with home games. Just a fantastic year. And you're at that place, and it's funny, you're at that place in the Notre Dame, the TV contract, and it seemed like, well, now everybody's on TV all the time, but it was different back then, and that's where I met Gene Wojciechowski and Malcolm Moran, and got to know that crew, which probably helped me get the Arizona State job.
So speaking of that, the linchpin, making the guy growing up in the Rust Belt, and then having the opportunity in South Bend, what brought you out here to the desert?
Awesome story. Take a road trip out here with ASU baseball, Notre Dame baseball, and we come out and we play Arizona State, and we play the Angels, and we play U of A on a trip. And I think we were definitely 0-0. We were starting our season. I think Arizona State was like 12-1 at the time. And I come out here, and I'm my first time west. I hadn't even been on a flight. I probably had 4 flights by that time of my life. I hadn't flown until I was in college.
Was Indiana as far west as you'd gone?
Basically, yeah.
Okay.
It was. like I said, I think I had only been on like 4 flights.
Wow.
And so I came out here, and I remember we were beating Notre Dame, and elderly lady sitting right in front of the press box, and I remember she saying, "What's your record?" We were up like 8-1. Arizona State's probably pitching their 7th guy. It's a Tuesday game, And I said, it's 0-0, or 0-0. And she says, well, that's why you're winning. And I said, okay. And she says, because you've had more time to practice. And I'm like, okay, that's a good point. So we play Arizona State a couple times. I forget, once or twice. We play Arizona a couple times. We play the Angels. And Pat Murphy's our coach, who might be maybe one of the greatest people in the world, as I sidetrack in doing stuff for people that will never repay him. I can't tell you how awesome he was for the low-paid, working hard, trying to make his move into the world. To me, but Pat Murphy was unbelievable. So we get back, and there's a job description on the fax machine says, the fax machine that says Arizona State, assistant SID, basketball. And at the time, I had accepted an offer to stay with Notre Dame full time, and I kind of went to John Heisler. I was like, "Hey, I won't apply for this, but boy, it's something. It's basketball SID. It's a natural step up. I would be number 2, whereas at Notre Dame, like number 6." And he said, "Well, go ahead and try. We can help you." And the first thing that happened was Roger Valdesari, I forget if it was Roger or John, they called Mark Brand and said, is the job open? Because if it's not open, if you know who you're going to hire, then we can all move in our different ways. And Mark said, no, it's wide open. And, I brought out the heavy hitters then at that point. I had Coach Huggins call. Roger called Mark. I got to know Bob Quinn from the general manager of the Reds because I had interviewed for a Major League Baseball job. And I basically just hounded Mark that, I want to get an interview. I want to go back out there. It was pretty cool. And flew out, had a good interview. Met with Sandy Hatfield Club, who was the AD at Drake, Charles Harris, Herman Frazier. And they offered me the job, and my dad was mad because he thought he had Notre Dame football tickets for the rest of his life. Back in Elwood City, Notre Dame's a pretty big deal.
Okay.
But I got this job and accepted it and jumped in my car and drove out here by myself. Now, what's funny is I actually drove across country last week, drove my daughter from Cleveland here after school ended, and I did the same trip, sort of the same way.
Oh,
but I was by myself back then, and there's no cell phones and there was nothing else. So it was like you got out of the car after 12 hours of driving, and you didn't speak to anybody you go to the hotel front desk and you're like, shit, I haven't spoken to anybody, So, but yeah, that's that. And one of the key things is I'm a big fan of a handwritten note. And one of the things was I was about to type Mark a thank you note on my computer because, I thought it had to look formal. And I've always written handwritten notes, but this was a job. Like, you're going to type it up on a computer. And Roger Valdesari walked in my office, and he saw me writing the note, and he said, what are you doing? And I said, typing up my thank you note. And he's like, no. And I just remember him walking back into his office. He came out, and he threw Notre Dame stationery down. He threw a stamp down in the letter, and he said, you're going to write Mark a thank you note, and we're going to get his home address. And I was like, wow. And I might have thought of that, but Roger was like, and we probably called somebody to get Mark's address in the phone book, back in those days. Yeah. And so I dropped Mark a note in the mail, and when Mark called to offer me the job, he said one of the things that kind of put it over was the thank you note, the handwritten thank you note.
Wow.
And that's why I'm a big fan of that. Roger was just such a good person in making sure you say thank you to people the right way, make sure they know that they're important in your eyes.
That's a really cool touch, especially these days. Everything's digital, disposable. Everything goes in the ether immediately. What are some of the other things that maybe along those same lines, just whether it's a handwritten note or just those little touches that you found over your career that really can maybe easy to overlook, but can make a big difference? And
I think one of the main things is I try to say thank you to people at the end of the day that helped me with something. It could be an athlete doing a post-game interview after a loss. It could be a coach with a hard loss. I really feel thank you for helping us. So I try to reach out as much as possible. And, there's some people out there that I think really appreciate it, and some maybe don't appreciate it. It's not they don't appreciate it, but it's okay. I still like reaching out to the media ahead of time, before a game, and just making sure they got what they want. You try to get to know as many people as possible. I have a real love for treating student media well, for various reasons. I take a lot of pride in that. But the other thing is our student assistants. I want them to treat people well. We put our student assistants in some really high-level positions. They're running sports. We had a student assistant handling swimming and GAs and students are handling swimming and diving. And so you want them to be professionals, and you want them to understand. And sometimes you might give them an idea and they might not understand why they're doing it, but you just try to do it. Try to teach them the right way. I don't know. I'm very thankful for people that go out of their way. We had somebody the other day. We had something we were trying to put together, and I'll just say that, DJ Foster has been absolutely outstanding in that way. We had something that we were doing that I couldn't have my hands on, and it was kind of brought to me, but he's handling it, and just the way he handled it was absolutely phenomenal. So, I make sure I reach out to DJ at the end of the day and and let people know how special that he is and how special of a day that he helped make for someone.
So one of those points that really kind of jumped out to me and is just that some folks in media relations or whatever perhaps act as gatekeepers and such, and you obviously and the rest of ASU staff do not at all, whether it's with the student media or even my own route. I never went to journalism school. I never thought that this was going to be, I just happened to, find my way into it. And I remember, I think it was, you contacted me maybe over Twitter, just randomly. I think, I don't even forget where I was at the time, writing somewhere. And you invited me in. I had a sit-down meeting with you and Mark. And, that was 13 years ago now. But what is it that, with here at ASU, and we media members, we talk all the time about how lucky we are, with the access that we have, that you guys understand. And we, and talking to people at other places, not very much, not that fortunate. What is it about your role and just, wanting to have, as many storytellers, people kind of in the, telling stories about Sun Devil athletics and student athletes?
The first thing is we've had athletic directors that embrace it. We've had coaches that embrace it. And not every coach has come in here and say we're going to have open access, but they really haven't guarded things. One of my I shouldn't say pet peeve, because everybody does. I don't try to judge the way somebody else runs their office, because I know they have reasons they do it. But I love the access we have for assistant coaches, because to me, we got to help them become head coaches. And that's not the way it is everywhere. I just think with Jeremy and Connor, Kimberly, Josh is with us, Paige, I want them to embrace media. And it doesn't necessarily mean Sports Illustrated or AZ Central or every single time. It's every kind of media. The work that Cronkite News does is fantastic. And they write features, that we use, that our athletes see. And now in the NIL era, it's another way to get athletes' story out there. I don't take for granted that Blaze spends thousands of dollars to travel to our sports. To me, that is absolutely awesome. When we can use a good Blaze cut on a promo or something, to me that means a lot. So the day that we can't embrace or want to help people doesn't mean it's always easy either. We'll give you a chance. We're going to give you a chance, and hopefully it can be beneficial to both.
You mentioned that it kind of maybe starts, from folks at the top. Mark Brand, legendary presence here. Your decades working with him, and just the countless stories that have been told about him, his kindness, his generosity, how open he is. What were some, now that you've had a couple years kind of at the helm of your own, how much of Mark Brand is here with you today, and what were some of the key lessons that perhaps you took from him? I think the best thing about Mark was he just did his job so well, so quietly, and everybody that, the national media, they knew they were getting helped with Mark. The other thing I learned from Mark is I call these folks first responders, and I don't mean this like you're just a front runner, but I will be honest with you. When a coach does his press conference, there's 100 people around you, right? When you win a game, there's 100 people around you. Who is there when you lose? And Mark taught me that's when you're needed most. And I take a lot of pride in that. You don't want to do it all the time because that means you're losing. But Mark was someone that was there. And the other thing about Mark is people have no idea how much he did behind the scenes to make a situation better, to save a situation, to put a coach in a different light. And it wasn't fake. It was, here's what you need to do. He would step in and say things to ADs or coaches, and he wasn't afraid to do it. He wasn't afraid to stick his neck out and say, this is what needs to happen. Now, maybe they didn't always do it, but there's a couple former coaches that have said they wish they listened to Mark more. And what's cool to me is we have good relationships with our former coaches. Rob Evans is one of my best friends. Dirk Cutter, I'm still mad that the Jaguars beat the Steelers. I know that play call where the guy held and the quarterback ran for the first down. I enjoy getting to know the coaches and then continuing to have relationships with those coaches and assistant coaches. To me, the assistant coaches are the greatest thing. There's nothing that's better than seeing a good friend of mine get a head coaching job.
To me, that's absolutely awesome, and so I really enjoy that.
All right, so let's transition maybe a little bit into story time. And names can be omitted to protect the innocence, but you've obviously heard thousands and thousands of questions in press conferences, post-game scrums, for our post-practice scrums. What's been like maybe the weirdest, most off-the-wall question from a media member to a coach and athlete that you can recall?
God, I can't recall the most off-the-wall, but I do recall Eddie House answer once, and Kyle Dodd tells this story as good as anybody, even though we'll get to him later.
Oh yeah,
we beat UCLA for the first time in 22 games, and there was no Pac-12 tournament then, or Pac-10 tournament, so we weren't going to play them again, and it was the last time we would play them. And Eddie House dropped 40 on him, and as he's at the free throw line, he literally checked himself out. He had 37. He looked at the board, and he's shooting free throws, and he's dribbling, looking at UCLA players. And one UCLA player fouled himself out of the game. He did not want to compete anymore. I won't say his name. He did not want to compete against Eddie House. And he's dribbling at the free throw line, and he makes the first one. He's like 38, and he's dribbling at the free throw line. He says 39. And Kyle tells us, because Kyle was in the lane, but I could see there was some chatter. And thank God there wasn't a lot of video back then. And he makes the last one, and he just points to UCLA. He goes, 40. Get the F off my floor. And he walks to the bench. Well, in the post game, someone asked him, Eddie, what if you didn't beat UCLA? And he says, if an if was a sixth, or if was whatever the saying is, we'd all be drunk. And it was like, I remember Kyle sitting there like, what the hell did he just say? And I just remember that answer. That would be a Twitter moment right now. And it kind of just came and gone. Nobody thought twice about it.
Yeah.
But I just remember that Eddie House game. It was one of the most random things, and he was so fun to be around that year. We had a jar for Eddie that as he was doing interviews that he had to drop a quarter in every time, and he got better because he wanted to quit saying so we started this little quarter thing, and it's kind of cool for me because I see Eddie the way he's become in media now. It's been awesome to see him such a great dad, and Jalen transferred, and people were like, and it was like Eddie still likes ASU, and Eddie, like, he's just one of those guys. It's been so fun to watch his career as a kid, and then grow into such a good dad. And then the career he had, that's a guy that knew his role. I mean, he carved out an NBA career that ended up with an NBA title. So that's one of my favorite success stories.
One of the other guys, obviously, the photo that kind of gets tweeted out every so often, you at the Heisman ceremony with Jake, just a couple years into the job, I believe at that point. What was that like, just, being around Jake and, having that success, and then the 96 the ride that whole season?
That season was unbelievable. What's neat about Jake is my first year was Jake's first year. So I'm not much older than Jake, and we kind of just became really good friends. And back in those days, you weren't texting a guy to do an interview. You were coming in. He was coming into our office, and that's how I got to know Pat so well. And so, I don't know if Bruce Snyder survives to the Rose Bowl now, the way people act.
Yeah,
he was 500 coach the first 4 years. And so Jake comes in, and to see that ride and the Nebraska game and the USC game, it just, people say, I always say we'll never have another year like that. And I don't mean we can't go undefeated. I'm just saying it was a different era. It was different. Kids were in your office more, and there was no social media. And people didn't know we beat Nebraska. Yeah, I mean, that's the truth. Some people woke up to that news. So, to be at the Heisman Trophy, I mean, we went to the Orlando show first, and I remember I got a call from it was just me and Jake. Coach Snyder and Mark were going to join us later, so it was just me and Jake in Orlando. And when we got, first of all, Jake might have got overserved in Orlando the night after the show. He might have been feeling it on the flight to New York. I just remember our flight to New York from Orlando. There was hardly anybody on the flight. And it was one of the bumpiest flights I've ever been on. Oh, and I thought Jake was going to vomit. And then I thought we might wreck. And I told Jake, this is going to be great. Like, it's going to be like Jake Plummer goes down, and oh, by the way, Doug Tammaro was on the flight too. Like, I'm going to be a side note. And we got to New York City, and we shared a ride in a limousine with Orlando Pace and Steve Snap.
Oh, wow.
Rest in peace. He was the Ohio State SID. And we got to the Downtown Athletic Club, and just had a wonderful weekend. I got a phone call from the Downtown Athletic Club to my room, because there was no cell phones back then. Mr. Plummer's family's playing handball. It was like 3 a.m. Can we not have them playing handball? And just, it's a magical thing. Now, there is a funny story that some of my closest friends know, is there was an autograph session where all the former Heisman Trophy winners were there, and the guys up for the award. And Jake was trying to get autographs while signing autographs. And I said, Jake, let me take your football here.
Yeah.
And I'll go get autographs. So I get Tony Dorsett and Doug Flutie, and I'm walking around this room, and it's getting time. We hadn't been to the main Heisman room. This was in another room. And at this time, it wasn't as organized as it was then. And I had the ball, and I'm getting on the elevator, and the elevator was all like, you almost think someone had a rope and was pulling it. It was like, we're so narrow. And so I get on the elevator, and all of a sudden the hand comes through the door, and Steve Spurrier steps on the elevator.
All right.
Okay.
Head ball coach.
I'm thinking Steve Spurrier is there for Danny Werfel. I love sports. I don't know Steve Spurrier won the Heisman. So Coach Spurrier gets on the elevator, and he says to me, what do you got there? I saw it's a ball for Jake Plummer. I'm trying to get all these Heisman Trophy signatures. and I'm not thinking, but he's kind of looking at me like, okay,
just waiting.
Just waiting. And he goes, you getting them all? And I just remember like the conversation. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, coach. And I'm kind of nervous. It's Coach Spurrier or whatever. And so the elevator, and he had to get off before I get off, because I was taking the ball back to Jake's room to throw it in the room to come back down for the ceremony. And Coach Spurrier gets off the elevator, and I just remember him turning back and looking at me, and he says, hey, good meeting you. Good luck getting all those signatures. I'm like, thanks, Coach. And so I come down the elevator, and I go to the Heisman room, and like the first picture on the wall I see is Steve Spurrier. And I'm like, oh my God, did I blow that one? And so I go to see Jake's like, hey, did you get them all? Did you get all those signatures? But I didn't get Steve Spurrier. And he's like, he's right there. Like, how'd you not get that one? Yeah, it's a long story. So anytime people that know that story, they kind of text me anytime they see Steve Spurrier, they talk about the Heisman ceremony. They'll shoot me a little note and say, hey, Spurrier got the Heisman. I don't know if we ever ended up getting his signature, though.
Oh. And then a few years later, you have another kind of transcendent figure on the basketball court. This time, James Harden. What was that like? Just those full beard years.
Yeah. So I knew we were getting a good one with James. We had Scott Para, who right now he's one of my best friends, and he's one of those examples of assistant coaches. And when we hired Scott, Scott, crazy story there. We get Scott, and we're trying to get James, and I just remember James coming, and sometimes people say you hire a guy to get a player, okay, and there might be some truth in all that, but sometimes you hire a guy to make sure that player stays online. And James, he wasn't the first one on the bus, but he wasn't the last, and he was a big time player who really fit in pretty damn well. And seeing his growth from no beard to beard, a few years ago when he was with Oklahoma City, Scott and I had a chance to go to a playoff game in Oklahoma City and just hang out with James and go to a post-game meal that thank God we didn't have to pay for because it was a lot more money than either of us could afford. It's been fun. I still stay in touch with James. It's funny. I don't have his cell, and I don't want his cell, because then people would say, can you get a hold of James? I'm like, no. I like texting Scott and telling James, and what I try to do is when James is in town, I go to shoot around just to spend some time with him. I don't go to the games because they're usually late at night and whatever, and I don't want to need to be there. I've seen enough games, but he's going to be around more now that the COVID thing stopped him coming on campus, but he's around more than people think. He's ending up his career, obviously. He's in the end of it, and we hope to see him around more. I know we plan to. it's been a blast. But I don't know if he's my favorite basketball player from Artesia High School. There's something about Derek Glasser that was really goddamn cool.
My next question, like, who are some of the Plummer and James, obviously, but who are like kind of your favorite, like maybe under the radar guys? That
door to door Sun Devil. My favorite Sun Devil of all time is Jeff Pendergraph, and the reason is he was injured early. He had a coaching change. He had a chance to leave. We lost 15 straight games, and he did every post game interview, and always handled it with such class and never got down. James came aboard, and the publicity kind of went to James, and Jeff didn't care. He just wanted to win. He graduated from here. He carved out a great NBA career. He's a great father. But I just remember that every single time I went to Jeff Pendergraph, because he was so good at giving interviews. It's probably the second best post-game interview we've had in basketball.
Who's number one?
Jamel McMillan.
Okay.
Jamel was brought in one time for a post game, and he did the post game for like 10 minutes. And one of the media says, "Oh, we don't even need Herb." Like it was when players went before. And but I just am always thankful for Jeff just for being so patient and such a good guy, and to see him get a championship ring. And when his playing career is finally done, and he's still playing overseas, if there's one thing I'll do, and I'll make sure he's going in our Hall of Fame as soon as he can be here. He's a Hall of Fame person. He's a Hall of Fame Sun Devil, and he's just great. Derek Glasser was awesome. I love the fact that Derek Glasser is still coaching.
Yeah.
Crazy thing about Derek Glasser is July of the summer, I forget when it was, but Kevin Kruger came in my office. It was like July 4th weekend. It was when Herb was hired. And Kevin Kruger came in my office and said, "I got to talk to you." And I said, what's going on? He said, "I'm transferring." Well, at the time, transferring meant sitting out a year. He only had 1 year to play because he had redshirted. And I'm like, "Where are you going?" And he said, "To play for my dad." And I said, "Okay, but wait, you don't have a year." And he said, "I graduated."
Oh.
Well, that was the graduate transfer. So Kevin Kruger was the original graduate transfer. And Kevin and I were talking, and he was concerned that he was leaving Herb because he liked Herb. But he had to do it. He said, "I got a chance to go play for my dad. It's a good team. I don't know what's going to happen here." And I said, "Okay, what did Herb say?" And he said, "I haven't told him." And I said, "So who knows?" And he said, "You and Shay Jewett was our academic coordinator." I said, "Kev, we got to get moving on this." And he said, "Well, you just give me a couple days. You can't tell Herb." I said, "Okay, I'll make you that promise. I can't tell Herb." So then I went upstairs, and I went and saw Scott Para. I'm not telling Herb, so I haven't lied. Scott and I had gotten close, in the first couple months on the job. I said, "Hey, man, I've got to talk to you. What's up?" I said, "Kevin Kruger's transferring." What? And the same questions. Well, he can't. He whatever. And I said, "I know." I said, "But here's the deal." I said, "But he wants to. It's got to go through this weekend, and he's going to tell her Monday." And immediately Scott said to me, "Let's get this moving because I got a guy. I got a guy that can replace him that would fit in really well, and he's just going to walk on the USC. Let's get this moving." I said, "Okay, why don't you tell Herb? And let's because I still haven't told Herb." And I said, "Okay." And I remember Scott saying, "We got a guy. He'll fill in for a year, and he'll be good, but he'll be a backup, and we'll recruit over him." And Scott's going to kill me when he hears this interview, but it's the truth. And then Herb called me that night, and I remember Herb saying, "Hey, I can't stop this, and I don't want to stop this. Like, Lon's a good guy, and it's a new rule, and we're probably going to stink, but we got to." But he said, "We got a chance to fill in a gap." And I said, "Yeah." So I forget what course it took after that. It sped up a little bit, and it felt good. And the next thing we knew, we had a walk-on campus. Not a walk-on. He got a scholarship at our place, but we had a point guard, Derek Glasser. And DG ends up being our all-time assist leader. He's the only Sun Devil to have 1,000 points and 500 assists. Our career free throw shooting leader. Actually, Shannon Evans passed him up, but Derek claims he is because Shannon played 2 years and Derek played 4. So Derek says he's the leader. I think Derek was rooting for Shannon to miss some free throws at the end because he was following it. But we ended up with DG, and that's just been fantastic to see the relationship with his family, his dad, who had passed away a few years ago. It was just awesome. He was a wonderful dude. And Derek's one of those guys. He was with us when we lost 15 and when we won 24. And, when we beat Temple in 09 in the NCAA tournament, James was not playing well. It was Derek who led us to that win. I think he had a career high that game. And so it's awesome. He's still real close to my family.
Another Sundeville guard has made a big impression on your life, and the best rivalry, the most entertaining, most consistent. I mean, Steelers Ravens is great and all, but but Tammaro B. Dodd is there some in a whole other category. What is take our listeners to the origin of one of the greatest rivalries in sports?
I don't know what it is. So what's crazy is Kyle did every single post-game interview as well. We used to put him on radio all the time, so it's very ironic. But Kyle was a guy that was, he was here for Eddie. Well, I say it a lot. There's a reason you're open. He was here for Eddie. He was here for Ike. He was in the tournament. He was here for the 61-point game. But he's just such a good family guy, And, he rarely pays for a drink on the road. He does yell at officials too much. But we've just kind of become good friends. Our kids are around the same age. He was part of some good teams. He was around some great players, and his passion for Arizona State is awesome. I mean, I'm going to tell you right now that that awful commercial that he did for the texting and driving,
where he's the coach and the
line. So I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. He was offered that, and he got a nice sum of money, and he donated some of it back to NIL.
Well, that's cool.
So no one loves our program more. He's a really good announcer. We just kind of become buddies through the years, probably from hotel bar lobby bars. The good and the bad. Just bus rides and being around him. We can go back in history and talk about some good things. But he's also a really good Sun Devil athletic fan and donor, and with all our sports. I mean, he goes to baseball games. Well, he goes to baseball games because he has a pass, and it's good for all the games. He rarely pays for tickets. But we can lean on Kyle for anything, and that's been a big part. He's truly one of my best friends right now. His kids are awesome. It's great to see his kids do so well, and he's also a dude that has given back. And when Graham got the job, you see a lot of support, social media, which we love. Good positive feedback. And, the LFGs and let's go, whatever. And Kyle's one of these people that's invested. He doesn't – I'm not saying everybody has to write a check. It's not for everybody. But Kyle's invested in various ways to try to make us better. So when we win a basketball game, I feel good for him. I feel good for Coach Hurley, and I feel good for Kyle as well because he deserves some fun.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you with the near end of the Pac-12.
Yeah.
What's your favorite Bill Walton story?
It was actually this past year. Well, there's so many of them that like the voice. I have so many voicemails on my phone from Bill. Bill's been so awesome to me and talking to people about me. But this year, we get off to a good start in basketball, and he has our game in 2 weeks. And he calls me, and let me put it this way. I'm watching Washington play championship game. Alabama? No. Georgia.
Yeah.
Who's in championship game? I forgot. So it's the college football championship game. And my phone rings, and it's Bill Walton. And I'm like, okay, that's odd. It was like third quarter. It was a good game. And I answered the phone, and I said, Bill. And he goes, Doug Tammaro, Bill Walton. He always says Bill Walton. Like, I see that on the phone, and it's Bill, Bill, how you doing? He goes, good. You're not watching this terrible football game, are you? And I was like, I didn't want to say yeah, but I was like, oh, yeah, what's up? And he's like, I just wanted to touch base with you on your team. I'll probably have you next week. He said, I'm going to call Connor tomorrow, but I just wanted to say hello and want to know if you had some time. And it was literally 9 o'clock on like the Monday night of the championship game. Yeah. And so we caught up. And, he has said some really nice things about me on TV, and sometimes he goes too far, and I want him to be quiet. And it's funny because when I was sitting where I used to sit for basketball, I would get the text like, "Oh boy, Walton, here's Walton on Tammaro," and I would sit there and think to myself, "Okay, don't pick your nose, don't roll your eyes, don't do anything stupid, because you're on TV." But one time, my dad asked, he said, "Doug, man," he said, everybody's talking about what Bill Walton had to say. Can you give me Bill's cell phone number? And so my dad called Bill, and Bill called my dad back and told him just some wonderful things that as a father you would feel pretty damn proud of.
That's amazing.
So, but Bill's just unbelievable. I mean, I he's one of the nicest, kindest persons I've ever met, but I don't mean celebrities. He's just a wonderful person. And it pains me to see what's happening to the Pac-12 because of someone like Bill. I miss Bill. I'm going to miss Bill forever. And Matt Enzor at Arizona, my good friend that does what I do down there, is very close to Bill. And he keeps, hey, Bill's coming in. Bill's this and Bill's that, and it's just so wonderful. It's sad Bill couldn't make the last Arizona State game. He was ill and he couldn't make the trip, but we had some special things planned for him. Sitting in the chair courtside, a video on the board. We had some stuff, but he couldn't make it. He was ill, so it's just a bummer he couldn't be here. But yeah, Bill's. I have probably 8 voicemails from Bill that are just saved forever. Between Bill Frieder and Bill Walton voicemails, I still have some.
So the story of how you helped get Pat's Run up and running, and it has been told. You can find that at azfamily.com, so I won't make you rehash that for the 10,000th time. But just obviously being able to be one of the key parts that keeps his memory, his legacy going all these years later, and just he's as vibrant and relevant today, it seems, than ever. What does that mean to you, just to be able to do that for him?
Someone said if you Google my name, Pat Tillman comes up, so I'm good. I'm good with that. A story that a lot of people don't know is I had a chance to have dinner with Pat in January of 2004. We were on a basketball trip in Seattle, and we had dinner at the Flying Fish in Seattle. It was me, Marie, and Kevin, and Sean Moore, who used to work in our office and worked in Washington. And it was January of 2004. It was the end of January, and he came in the restaurant, and he was trying to get in the restaurant. There was a bunch of windows, and he couldn't figure out which one was the door. And he was like, what the hell? And so finally he got in the restaurant, and he said, I said, well, it's good to know that national security is in the hands of somebody that can't get in an effing restaurant. And he's like, and he's loud, and I just remember him screaming I was about to put an effing charge on that door, blow that thing open. And he walked in, and he just looked the part like an ass kicker, man. He just looked like it's what you want a soldier to look like. He looked big and strong, and I said, man, you look bigger. And he says, I'm just wearing a lot of shirts. And we sat down for dinner, and I remember the dinner lasted 5 hours, coffee, whatever. And Kevin, who's very close to me now, I just remember that night, he told me that night, because we wanted him to do a couple things, on video for freshman orientation. He said, I don't want to do it while I'm in the service, but I will do anything that you need me to do when I'm done here. I will help Arizona State any way I can. And, hugged him that night and got a couple voicemails and calls from him since. And I remember him saying he was going back over to the Mid-East, and, then got that call. Kent Summers actually called me and said, this has happened. And but because that dinner that night, I kind of had the confidence to say I felt like I needed. I felt like that dinner kind of gave me the okay to move forward with things. I mean, there was a lot of you're exposing Pat, or he wouldn't want this, and I was comfortable enough with the help of Marie, his mom, his dad, his brother, and then Alex Garwood, who's Pat's brother-in-law. Moving forward with things. Alex and I joke around now that, we wish we never met, because we met because Pat passed. But 20 years later, I feel like we're in a good place with Pat's legacy. We got bridges and schools and statues and all that stuff. And I tell people will say, what would Pat say? And I used to say, well, I don't want to speak for him, But now my answer is, Pat would be proud that people are making a difference in their life or others because of him. Like when you cross that finish line, or when you see people cross that finish line and that's their goal, when you see an elementary school kids wearing 42, when I see a 42 on a little kid, when I see a name, when a kid crosses the finish line, he's named Tillman.
Yeah.
That hits, man. Like, that means a lot.
There's been so many Pat stories from his days in the maroon and gold, on and off the field, some of which aren't fit for air.
Yeah.
But, from his time when he was here at Arizona State, what's your favorite Pat Tillman story?
I like the famous photo on the tower. Paul Giro came in and was going to do the photo he was with AZ Central or Arizona Republic. There was no AZ Central back then. Arizona Republic, and Sports Illustrated hired him, and he said, hey, we're going to set up some books, in a desk and have you take a photo. And you can tell Pat was like, Pat wasn't disrespectful, so he was going to do it. He said, all right, we'll do this photo, whatever, but I got something better. And Paul was like, okay, and off they went. Didn't know. And they went up, and I don't know how he got up because it should be locked. And not only did they go up, but they went up, all the way to the top, and took that photo where Pat is in his flip-flops. And nowadays, Paul would have taken a photo and tweeted it and said, we're doing the story on Pat Tillman. No one knew that photo was coming. And the story goes, Bruce Snyder walked in Dick Arbuckle's office and said, what is our guy doing? And he shows him the magazine, and people are like, how did he get up there? When did he go up there? And I just remember Pat just saying, I'm taking Paul. And to this day, Paul, he gave everybody the right, he understood, he could have saved the photo and had copyright. And he was kind of like, man, this is a great photo. I want this thing to live forever. And Doug Haller wrote a really good story about the photo.
Yeah.
A couple years ago.
Doug's so good at that.
Yeah. And it's, I'm glad the story was told the way he told it. He touched on it the way he should. The other ones are the simple ones, like Pat walking in our office and he was like in flip-flops and like a tank top, and he was supposed to do a TV interview, and he just walked in, and I remember Mark saying to him, wow, you're dressed like that? And Pat just looking at Mark saying, do you want me to do the effing interview or not? The story behind the scenes, though, of study hall was big to me. Pat was goofing around his freshman year in study hall. And Jill DeMichael was his academic coach, and she walked up to him and said, Pat, I need you to kind of get focused here. And he said, well, I don't need to be here, because he had 3.7. And he wasn't disrespectful, but Jill said he was just like, I didn't want to be there. He didn't want to be in study hall to study freshman English.
Yeah.
And she said, yeah, but these guys need you here, and they need you focused. And we need to get off to a good start with these guys. And after that, he was perfect.
What is Doug Tammaro today telling Doug Tammaro back in '93, stepping foot, first day of on the job?
To enjoy people like Bill Frieder as much as I did, honestly. Like, he was so much fun. That was really fun. I wish there was a time period there I didn't get to know the football players as well because I was working more basketball, and the time came where I wish I would have got to know some more football players through the years. I really enjoy our staff right now. Jeremy and Connor. I mean, we got people that work really, really hard. I wish I could stay in touch more with my former staff, and I try to, because I want to see if there's anything that I can do to help them as much as I can. Do I have a few regrets? I felt like I could have stepped up more in some situations that, I don't want to talk about yet, but there's some times where I think I could have had a bigger, better voice that maybe makes sense now. When you look back, I should have said some things. But it's been fun. This place has been good to me. 31 years at the end of June. I don't have really many regrets. It's been wonderful. The Final Four committee I'm on, I go do that every year. I disappear for a week. That's good for Arizona State for me to be there, and it's allowed me to host 2 Final Fours and do it decently. We have the women's coming up in a couple years. There's not many regrets. I wish we would have won that. My worst loss, not mine, but the loss that still stings the most, people assume it's the Rose Bowl. and that stung, right?
Yeah.
To me, it's the 2009 Pac-10 championship game in basketball.
Ooh.
I always struggle to get over that one because it was an afternoon game. I might have got overserved the night before. I was struggling at the game. We're up 15. And I remember the media, Dave Hirsch told me at halftime, hey, they're starting to turn in their votes for MVP. Harden's going to win. And I was like, no, like, Derek Glasser needs to be the MVP. He's been better. And I also knew it would be a better story because Derek was from L.A. and he was that guy that was a former walk-on, whatever.
Yeah.
And his dad was such a good dad. And I remember talking to Bill Platsky about, this would be a great column. His dad does the jeans company, and he's a local kid, and this is all going on at halftime. And there's been many times in my career where you prepare for a win, and then you lose, and you just whatever. Yeah. And then there's times where you prepare for a loss, and then you end up winning. I can tell you right now, when we beat Kansas at home, we were losing the whole freaking game. I was not ready for post-game for a rush the floor and get Bobby Hurley to like that, whatever. But and then so that loss was painful because I knew how hard it was for basketball to win. Right? I mean, it's hard. It's a hard job. Like, our basketball coaches have been the SEC Coach of the Year, the Big Ten Coach of the Year, the ACC Coach of the Year, the MAC Coach of the Year. It's a hard job. Okay, it is what it is. And so I respect that winning that Pac-10 title that year in a tournament was going to be a big thing. So that one always stings me. But, yeah, it's as I look back, there's certain things that I kind of remember. The Rose Bowl. People often kid me that I don't show a lot of emotion at courtside or on the court or whatever. It's because of the Rose Bowl. I was in the end zone when Jake dove into the end zone, and I jumped in my suit. Yes, I just remember pumping my fist, and then 1 minute and 40 seconds later, I'm sad. So I've ever since then, I'm like, no. I didn't. The Dez shot is a wild story because Connor Smith, who's our basketball SID, sits courtside. And I went down to that game, and I told Matt Enzor, I don't need a seat. I can just walk around the building. And I actually I didn't wear ASU stuff that day because I just wanted to take in McHale Center. Yeah. That's a fantastic basketball atmosphere. I mean, they have a couple of fans that are a little out of control behind the bench, but it's an awesome atmosphere. And so I just wanted to take it in. So I was walking around the building, and I was in the media relations office in Arizona watching the game on the TV. And what I realized was, in the last couple minutes, the TV was about 30 to 45 seconds behind.
Oh, no.
So I walk out in the court when I forget somebody missed the shot. The three, we were down 2. We took a wide open, good shot, 3 to win.
Yeah.
And that's when Ballo went over somebody's back and fouled, and they didn't call it, and Ballo goes to the free throw line. So I went back into the Arizona Sports Information Office to watch the last 10 seconds. And I'm watching it. And Ballo's at the line, and you could hear stuff happening and then see it on TV, right?
Yeah.
That was happening. And I'm there, and he shoots the first, and he misses, and I'm waiting for the band. I'm waiting for Bear Down. And I just remember he's at the line, and I heard this, wow, like this weird noise. And I'm watching it on TV, and he's shooting the free throw, and all of a sudden I look at my phone. And you ever taken your phone and just scroll? Like you hit text and you just scroll. That's what my phone was doing without me touching it. So it was people texting me, what a shot. Oh, my God, I can't believe it. Are you kidding me? And I looked at my phone like, what are they? And then it occurred to me, we must have hit a half-court shot. And I look up at the TV, and I see Dez get the ball and shoot it. Well, at this point, I'm watching it on TV. People are starting to come in the media relations office. I'm gathering that we just won the game and I just saw it. My first thought, it's going to get waved off. Like, this is too good to be true, right? Because the thing about that game was it was such a good game.
Yeah.
It was a fantastic game that if we lost, or there were things that wouldn't, whatever. But it was a great game. It was one of the best games we've ever played in Tucson, win or lose. And so I start walking out in the court, afraid, not even knowing, like, did we win? Is this whatever? And I saw the referees walking off. And I'm like, oh, my God, we just won on a half-court shot. So I walk out in the court. People were going crazy. There's chaos. And Bobby Hurley fist bumps, and his ring flies off from his Final Four, and it flies underneath the stands. So I'm on the floor trying to get his ring. There's a guy giving him hell from the stands. Bobby's starting to scream back at him. I just want Bobby to get to the locker room because the last thing you want at this point is an incident. You don't want an incident overshadowing. And our players, nowadays kids get with the fans, whatever.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to do all this stuff. And then and when I finally got to the locker room, it kind of occurred to me that the greatest shot in the last 30 years of Arizona State history, I watched it on tape delay in the Arizona Sports Information Office. So sometimes you're not in the right place at the right time.
The life of an SID.
Yeah.
When you look back at the kind of totality of the almost 31 years now, what have been just the most rewarding aspects, whether it's something individual, broad strokes, what has been really kind of the most uplifting and kind of driving forces of your life?
Pat Tillman, the whole scenario, the way this has happened. I'm proud that Arizona State embraces him. I'm proud that his mom comes to the run. I'm proud that Kevin Tillman and his wife Candy can come to me with concerns or thoughts. I'm proud of that. I love our former students and our former assistants doing well. When Will Edmonds got the job with USA Weightlifting last summer as their PR director and social media director, to me that was I told Will when he got here in 2020, you're gonna be here for a couple of years and we're gonna get you somewhere else. I like it when our employees get thanked. When Jeremy Hawks gets thanked by Willie Bloomquist. Connor Smith does an absolutely wonderful job. Our staff does a lot of social media, and you're never, you're always out there on social media. To see our staff grow and to have somebody tell me our staff member was awesome, whether it be a media member or a fan, that's something that really makes me proud. And I am proud of the fact that this will be the first summer where we're not getting ready to host a national championship. Like we hosted 3 straight in golf, and we hosted the Final Four. And because of that, I kind of felt like my time with ASU got a little taken away, and I'm kind of looking forward to focusing more on ASU. But I'm proud of the fact that we've hosted some major events here and done really well. I'm also very proud that we have former coaches that I'm in touch with, and that's very, very important to me. Even though they've been let go or resigned, I want them to know that I still care about them. That's really important to me. And then, like I said, our staff, I wish I could do more for our current staff. They work so hard. They are behind the scenes. But I want people to understand how good they are and how much they do. Sometimes I can come off as the guy that wants to tell people wants people to know how hard they work. It's also I want people to know how influential they can be and how they have such a big impact on Sun Devils coaches, staff, and players.
Over these 3 decades, what has this Sun Devil community, whether it's the student athletes, the coaches, the people in the building, fans, alumni, what has this kind of Sun Devil Nation meant to you, and what's really kind of jumped out most to you about what this community can do?
Well, I think it's what it can do is what's about to happen. I mean, let's be honest. The last 3-4 years have been hard on everybody. There's I always use the phrase, there's a reason the windshield is bigger than the rear view mirror, and I firmly believe that. We got people in place now that are ready to get to work again. Not that the people before didn't work hard, but our hands were tied. Our hands aren't tied now. And we need people to embrace the people like Kenny Dillingham, who's working his ass off. Bobby's recreated himself. I don't think what people understand about Bobby is how much he enjoys being the Arizona State basketball coach. It's hard, and it has its challenges, but Bobby wants to embrace it. He will be so happy. I don't think Bobby's looking to go anywhere, right? Bobby wants to be Arizona State's basketball coach and win here. And I'm looking forward to, I know it's going to be hard in the Big 12, there's some things, but I'm looking forward to a future. It's crazy what's happened in the last 10 months, we have a new conference, we have a new AD, we have a new football team, we have a new basketball team. That's probably the way it's going to be a lot, moving forward.
Yeah.
We got a wide receivers coach who was one of my second favorite Steeler of all time, so that's been kind of wild. So as I appreciate Sun Devil Nation. I appreciate those people that have invested. I'm very thankful. If you haven't invested and you have an opinion and you're behind closed doors, it's hard to really take you serious. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but we need people out front. And if everybody ever has an opinion or a thought or an idea, my email is right there. I mean, my cell phone number is on the directory. Some of my best relationship and best things that I've had happen are people that just reach out to me and we just make something happen special. So I'm there for you.
So I'd like to end these type of interviews with a question that I think is going to be of particular interest. You just, it's not often that the guys behind the scenes become a known name. But you and Mark Brand, obviously, a testament to the quality of the work that Sunville fans everywhere know your name. But 15, 20 years down the road, whenever it is that you hang up the
it ain't gonna be 20.
Yeah.
It's not gonna be 15 either.
Whatever it is, you hang up the SID equivalent of the cleats.
Yeah.
Down the road, how do you hope Sunville fans remember the name Doug Tammaro?
We always treated people well. That when they got in the place, if they met me, they felt like they were taken care of. And the other thing is, if I didn't do something perfectly, it's not because I didn't care. It's because I just goofed up, might have forgotten. But I want people to know I care, and I always will care. If you've worked here and you were a good person, you have a relationship with me. I'm not going away. I'm always there to support you, and I'm always going to be around. And obviously, I want people when they leave here to say, "Hey, man, those are good dudes." To me, those are good people. And I think we're in that spot. I would like people to understand that we care. That's very, very much important to me, and that if I don't get to you right away, it's not because I don't think you're important. It's just because I'm probably trying to help somebody else out. But that's the main thing is you don't have to be the smartest person in the room, and I actually would prefer not to be, and I usually am not. But I do try to care the most.
I'd like to thank Doug, not just for taking the time to talk with me for this episode and sharing his expertise, insight, and so many wonderful stories, but also for helping to set up this episode and so many other sit-down series episodes you've heard throughout the years. Make sure you are subscribed to Speak of the Devils on the podcast platform of your choice for more great sit-down series episodes featuring guests such as offensive coordinator Marcus Arroyo, Sean Na'a, CJ Fight, Emmett Boley, DeCarlos Brooks, plus many others with players and coaches in the coming weeks and months of the offseason. And make sure to follow me on social media at bdenny29.